Uganda's defense budget has hit the 1 trillion shillings mark, an expenditure which reflects largely on the UPDF forays to troubleshoot conflicts in the restive region. Currently, the army is deployed in the neighboring South Sudan to shore up the fragile regime of Salva Kiir against his adversary, Dr. Riek Machar. By the end of April, it was estimated that the UPDF had spent about 40 billion shillings to sustain its mission in the war-racked country. Uganda's troops are also deployed in Somalia and Central African Republic, though largely the bills are picked by the African Union. The current FDC president and former army commander, Major General Mugisha Muntu, says the raising expenditure on defense is not necessary at the time the army has vanquished rebellions.
If that money was going into welfare of soldiers, that would be a different question from what we believe on the destination where that money is going. We got the information that a big chunk of that money is actually not going into defense, but it's just a political slush fund. So defense is just being used as a channel to channel that money for political purposes.
Speaking about the South Sudan conflict, Muntu said there's need to probe further such reckless military adventures.
So it's not likely to see any shift in the political military dynamics within this region until, one, the question of South Sudan is resolved. One would have hoped that we would get countries that could contribute forces that would stabilize South Sudan and UPDF pulls back.
However, a senior presidential advisor on political affairs, David Mafabi, argues that the expenditure is justified because the country must forestall plans of enemy forces.
Kony was kicked out. He was fought. The UPDF blasted him far beyond our borders. And it came, and the president has talked about this repeatedly, it came by doing something about the capabilities of the UPDF, by acquiring certain weaponry, by being able to deploy that weaponry. It didn't just happen.
Mafabi defended the deployment of the army in South Sudan, saying it was strategic as Uganda's historical adversaries could use the crisis to sow mayhem.
The fact that governments have been involved in this conflict and spilling over to Uganda is well known. The fact that governments in the region have been arming negative forces and deploying them against other countries is fact. And Uganda has been a victim of that. That Sudanese conflict was one huge chessboard for the playing out of exactly what you're talking about.
Uganda has allocated $396 million to the defense sector in this financial year's budget, up from $380 million last year. While reading the budget, Uganda's Finance Minister Maria Kiwanuka said the key defense priorities will be in professionalizing its forces, promoting peace efforts in South Sudan and Somalia, and securing the country's interests within the region. But Uganda does not rule the waves in a war-weary region which also faces the growing threat of terrorism. Kenya, which has spent most of the year at war with the Al-Shabaab insurgents, pushed its budget to $1.7 billion from last year's $1.3 billion, where Rwanda, whose troops recently engaged DRC fighters in a shooting war at the border, has raised its defense budget to $90 million from $80 million last year. Uganda's implacable foe, Sudan, could spend as much as $2.4 billion on its defense sector. As countries in the region ramp up their firepower driven by deep-seated suspicion and anticipation of real and imaginary wars, the only likely outcome is the defense expenditure will continue to rise. Emmanuel Mtaizibwa, NTV Weekend Edition.